Welcome. My name is Kate Nuri, here hosting Macmillan's Psychology Speaker Series. I'm excited to have all of you join us today for our 2021 kickoff event with Dan Gilbert for his talk, Busting the Myths About Happiness. And it's so great to see some of you coming back from attending some of our events in the fall. So welcome back. First, I want to go over some quick GoToWebinar functionality so that you know what you should be seeing. In your top right corner, you should see a little arrow like this orange arrow. You can use that to pop out the GoToWebinar menu. Also on the right are these two squares, these two boxes right here, and these are really the functions that you would be using today. One is for audio and one is for questions. So to communicate with us, you use that question dropdown. The last thing that I think you would need is this blue flower that would be in your system tray, and that's how you can maximize and minimize GoToWebinar at any time. Okay, so before I turn it over to Dan Gilbert, let me just explain today's format. The format will include Dan's talk for about 25 minutes, followed by 20 minutes of a Q&A session. Everyone here is on mute, and that's to cut down on background noise and to ensure a good viewing experience. And throughout the presentation, as I said, feel free to insert your questions into that questions feature of GoToWebinar, the little square in the top right of the GoToWebinar menu. And I'll do my best to address as many of the questions as I can in that 20-minute Q&A. And we are live streaming, so just bear with us during any unanticipated pauses or delays. I don't know who got the Washington Post update today that there are internet problems up and down the East Coast, and I thought that was great timing. So you never know what could happen during one of these events. We are recording today's event, and we will post it to our psychology community within a couple of days, and we will also email it out to you, so you can look for that in your inbox. So let me introduce our presenter. Daniel Gilbert is the Edgar Pierce Professor of Psychology at Harvard University. After attending the Community College of Denver and completing his BA from the University of Colorado, he went on to earn his PhD from Princeton. From 1985 to 1996, he taught at the University of Texas, Austin, and in 1996, he joined the faculty of Harvard. He's received the American Psychological Association's Distinguished Scientific Award for an early career contribution to psychology, the Diener Award for outstanding contributions to social psychology, and has won teaching awards that include the Phi Beta Kappa Teaching Prize and the Harvard Collar Professorship College. His research focuses on how well people think about their emotional reactions to future events. He's the author of the international bestseller, Stumbling on Happiness, which won the Royal Society's General Prize for the Best Popular Science Book of the Year. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Dan Gilbert.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Gilbert, and I am happy to be here with my Macmillan friends. I'm not sure exactly where here is anymore, since we all exist as little windows on a Zoom screen in cyberspace, but I feel confident a new day has dawned and that we are all going to reemerge into the sunlight of reality pretty soon. But I'm delighted to be here to talk to you a little bit about the science of happiness. I teach introductory psychology, as many of you probably do as well. And one thing we intro teachers know is that half of our job is teaching students things that are true, and the other half is teaching them about the things they think that are true that really turn out not to be. Everybody has theories about the mind and the heart, about human behavior, and a lot of what we do as psychologists could be thought of as myth busting, trying to help our students see that the way they see the world intuitively, naturally, the things they've learned along the way before they hit our classrooms aren't always right. And that's really very much the case with the science of happiness. So let me tell you a little bit about what we know. Now, I've been studying the science of happiness for about 20 years. I wrote a book with the word happiness in the title. And if you're ever crazy enough to do that, you're going to get one question over and over again, which is, hey, doc, what's the secret of happiness? I know it's the oldest question in the book, but can you tell me? And what's so interesting to me about this question, which I do get over and over, is it's not the oldest question in the book. In fact, in many ways, it's the newest question. Because for most of human history, life was nasty, short, and brutish, in the words of the philosopher Thomas Hobbes. food was scarce. A day of labor was long. Good health was brief. 70% of your children wouldn't live to adulthood. And basically, for most of human history, people got up in the morning and their entire to-do list was try not to die today. And if they didn't, it was a good day. And everybody knew the secret of happiness because it wasn't much of a secret. Happiness is what would happen if you could just get what you wanted. And that, of course, never happens in this lifetime. So that's a pretty good summary of 98% of human history. And then something really miraculous happened. 3 revolutions took place in rapid succession. About 10,000 years ago, the agricultural revolution. We learned to grow food. About 200 years ago, 250 years ago, the Industrial Revolution. We learned to make great machines. And then just about 60 years ago, the technological or digital revolution, where we created the computer and the internet and all of the technology that flows from that. And as a result of these 3 revolutions, something really interesting has happened. For the very first time in all of human history, large populations of people have everything they want, everything they reasonably could want, mainly here in the places where the lights are on at night. And guess what? Although they have what they want, they are not always happy. Indeed, even those who have far more than anyone could want aren't happy all the time. Now, if happiness came from getting what we want, then these guys should all be like billions of times happier than any of us are. I've met all 5 of them. They're not billions of times happier. And so the question is, why do we think we would be? Why, if happiness isn't getting what we want, then why do we think it is? Why do we think that earning billions of dollars, that changing the world with our innovations, that getting new cars and houses, that getting marriages and promotions and kids and awards, why do we think all of these things will make us happy? Well, one of the things, in fact, maybe the thing that makes our species so unique is culture. And culture means that we don't have to discover everything about life for ourselves. We are all the recipients of a great deal of cultural wisdom that's handed down to us through the generations. Everybody from our mothers to bartenders to taxi drivers, talk show hosts, spiritual advisors, they all can tell us where happiness is to be found. The problem with cultural wisdom is it turns out it's not always wise. And we know this because in the last 20 years or so, scientists have gotten into the happiness business. Economists, psychologists, neuroscientists, sociologists, demographers, all of them have started studying the causes of human happiness. And it just turns out that some of the things our culture tells us simply aren't right. So let me tell you some of the things that science has discovered about the true causes of human happiness by introducing you to my mother. Hi, Mom. She wasn't a scientist. That's not why I'm introducing you to her. I'm introducing you to her because she was, for me, like yours was for you, your original source of cultural wisdom. Mom taught me a lot of things about happiness, and my mom said that 3 things were particularly important. First of all, marriage. Now, she didn't sit me down and give me a list of things, but it became clear to me early on that someday I should find a nice girl and settle down. Second, money. My mom wouldn't have used the term money. She would have said something like, it's good if you don't have to worry. You should be comfortable. You shouldn't have to live at home the rest of your life. Something about financial well-being. And third, children. Because after all, children are bundles of joy. What else is life about? So for my mom, these 3 things were very important. Now, I always thought that was just my mom, but what I found out when I began to study happiness is it's everybody's mom. Every mother in every culture on earth gives their children some form of these 3 pieces of advice. How good are these 3 pieces of advice? Are they right? Well, let's explore what science has to say about each one of them. First of all, does marriage make people happy? Well, if you just looked at the data on happiness for people in different marital status groups, you would conclude that it probably does. Married people are happier than separated people and divorced people. They're happier than single people, and they're actually happier than people who are pretending to be married, people who are living together without the benefits of the wedding ring. And it's not really surprising that this is the case. If you look deeply into the data, you find that married people are healthier, married people live longer, married people have more money per capita, married people have sex more often and enjoy it more. Virtually everything you would imagine as part of the recipe for a happy life, married people have more of. This isn't just true now, it's true across the entire lifespan. What you're seeing here is a very typical U-shaped curve of happiness over the lifespan. People start out pretty happy when you're young, it's a happy time, and then midlife comes and people get less and less happy on average. And then they revert to their original levels of happiness about the time they become my age and even older. So this is the U-shaped curve of happiness. Now, if we break it down by people who are married and people who are unmarried, what do we see? We see this. Both of them show the dip in midlife, but for married people, that dip is much shallower. Moreover, no matter what age you are, being married makes you happier than not being married. This is also true. This is not a new phenomenon. This is true for about as long as we've been collecting good data on the happiness of people all over the world. And what do you see here? You see happiness from the 70s to about now. You see that happiness goes up and down with year. You won't be surprised. 2020 is going to go on record as one of the least happy years across the world. So there's variation. But the other thing you see is that although these lines are wiggling, they never intersect. That is, in every year, married people are happier than unmarried people. And another way to look at this graph is to say, in the worst year, married people are still happier than unmarried people are in the best year. Now, one of the ways that scientists answer questions about causality, what makes people happy, for example, is by following people over time. Because one possibility is maybe happy people get married. Maybe it's not marriage making them happy. Maybe they were happy to begin with. We can resolve that by looking at data like these. You can follow people across time, and what do you see? You see that as they get close to the wedding day, they're getting happier and happier, and the wedding day is a good one. There's a little honeymoon period, and then happiness starts to come back down. But even 6 years out, it's not as far down as it was 6 years beforehand. So happy marriage does seem to be creating a happiness boost. Now, what happens if you take this curve and you pull it out even more years? I'll try to get out of the way here. What you see is, yes, happiness eventually returns to its baseline. In other words, the boost we get from marriage doesn't last forever, probably somewhere between 10 and 20 years. Whenever I tell audiences this, when I can see my audiences, they go, oh, and I think, well, wait a minute, you get an extra 10 to 20 years of happiness out of life for saying I followed by do followed by a period. That's a pretty darn good investment. Now, what about if marriage makes you happy, you might think that divorce makes you sad, but it doesn't. Divorce also makes you happy. Here's a data set on how happy men are before and after divorce. And as you can see, men get a lot happier when they leave their wives. And guess what? Wives get a lot happier when they leave their husbands. Now, wait a second. How do you put all this together? Marriage makes you happy and divorce makes you happy. Is the recommendation here that you kind of do the Hollywood thing and you get married and divorced in rapid succession? No, no, no. Put these data sets together and you understand what they're telling you is it's not marriage that makes people happy. It's good marriage. That's right. Marriages that are at least good enough not to bail out of seem to make people happy, but marriages that are unhappy actually make people happier when they dissolve. You know, the very best predictor of whether marriage makes somebody happy is their answer to this survey question. Is your spouse your best friend? People who say yes to that seem to get a very big boost out of marriage. Okay, so mom seemed to be right about marriage, at least largely right. Marriage looks like it makes people happy. What about money? Excuse me. Now, if you ask people, can money buy happiness? I actually did this on a TV show. I stood in Boston Common and interviewed people. I said, excuse me, ma'am, do you think money can buy happiness? I can tell you, they all go, no. They say, no, money can't buy happiness. And then they tell you some high-minded sentiment about what can buy happiness. Every one of them is wrong. Money buys happiness. If you don't think so, you've probably never met somebody who lives in a cardboard box under a bridge. Money makes people happy. On average, rich nations are happier than poor nations. On average, rich cities are happier than poor cities. And on average, rich people are happier than poor people. Mo money, mo happy, full stop. Now, Jeff Bezos is almost surely happier than this homeless gentleman. But he probably isn't happier, or at least not measurably happier than me or you. What does that mean? It means that every dollar we earn buys us happiness, but not the same amount. What you're seeing here is the relationship between income, it's the same if I plot wealth, and happiness. And what you notice is that this relationship isn't linear. It's curved, right? There's a purple curve on this slide. And what that tells you is that some dollars buy more happiness than others. And those dollars are the first dollars. The first dollar you earn buys you a lot of happiness. The next dollar, just a little bit less. And at some point, the curve starts to almost get flat. At some point, you've gotten virtually all of the happiness out of money that money can buy. What is that point? How much would you have to earn in today's American dollars to get, say, 95% of all the happiness that you will ever get out of money? The answer is about $60,000 a year. That's a small number. Now, I'm not suggesting $60,000 is a small salary. Most Americans would be getting a pay raise if they could earn $60,000 a year. What I'm saying is it's not rich. The difference between you and Jeff Bezos is almost the same as the difference between Jeff Bezos and the homeless guy. But it doesn't matter because the difference between you, Jeff Bezos, and me and the homeless guy is terrific, but Bezos isn't very different than we are because we're already way past the 95% point on the happiness and income curve. Now, some economists will say, if money isn't making you happy, then you're just not spending it right. And that sounds amusing, but it actually turns out to be true because people often do the wrong things with money. One of the reasons that the curve flattens is people aren't spending those dollars in ways that would actually make them happy. How do we know? Well, look, you're looking at data right now. I got to point backwards. You're looking at data right now that are showing you how happy people are in real time as they go about a number of normal everyday human activities. And what you see is people are not very happy at work. They don't have jobs like mine or yours. They're not happy when they're driving to work. They're okay when they're watching TV. They really like talking because that's usually when they're in the company of friends and family. And guess what? Great discovery. Human beings like sex. So none of this is very surprising, but here's what should surprise you. Here's how happy people are when they are resting, when they're doing nothing at all. About as happy as when they're at work. And yet, if you ask people, what would you do if you won the lottery? If suddenly you were liberated from all wealth concerns and you could do anything you wanted in life, most people give you an answer that's some version of rest. Oh, I'd get a yacht. I'd put a hammock on the deck. I'd stare at the stars. I would just, pour myself a Mai Tai and sit on the beach. I'd rest. Bad answer. This graph suggests the right answer is something like, I would talk during sex. That might get you some happiness, but not resting because people don't know what to do with their money. What should people do with their money? Well, science actually has two important discoveries that can help people spend money better. The first is that as far as bang for the buck, experiences seem to buy more happiness than things. If you have the choice between a brand new car or a week in Paris, many of you will say the sober thing to do is to take the new car because I can sell it later and it will retain its value. And well, maybe financially that's the smartest thing to do, but I can tell you that as an investment in your happiness, it certainly is not. Experiences beat things, and they beat things for a couple of reasons. First of all, experiences are almost always something you do with other people. And humans are very happy when they are in the company of family and friends. The second thing about experiences, they don't last long enough to get old, right? If you buy this car, at some point you're going to love it the first day, the first week, the first month, and at some point you're going to dislike it so much you're going to try to sell it to somebody. You never do that with your vacation photos from Paris, right? You never put them on eBay and say, I'm just tired of these things. No, in fact, experiences give you more and more happiness as the years pass. So experiences seem to be a better investment than things. Second, spend more on others and less on yourself. Now, I'm not here to give you a sermon. I'm not your priest, your preacher, your rabbi, your imam. I'm not any of those things. I'm just telling you what the data said. And the data suggests that people get more happiness from spending money on others than on themselves. Give two groups of people in an experiment $20 and give them 1 hour to spend it. One has to buy something for themselves. One has to buy something for someone else. What will you find? The second group is happier. If you have any wonder about this, try this next time you're at Starbucks. Just while you're ordering, say, oh, and the person in back of me, their coffee is on me. You're going to find you've just spent $2 to get a jolt of happiness in your own life. That's a lot bigger than what you would get from an extra shot of espresso. People, when they're generous, when they're altruistic, when they're philanthropic, they get happiness from it. Indeed, giving to others in terms of happiness is one of the most selfish things you can do. Well, okay, so marriage and money. What about children? Now, children seems like the really easy one because, we call children. In America, we say, oh, you got a new bundle of joy, right? They're named after happiness. Maybe money, maybe marriage, but certainly children make us happy, don't they? Well, actually, if you look at the data and you compare parents to non-parents, you see that people with children are less happy than people without them. And indeed, people with children are the least happy when their children have the audacity to actually be living with them. Now, that doesn't mean that children cause unhappiness, does it? Most of you are scientists and all of you are scientifically literate. You know that just because parents are less happy than non-parents doesn't mean that the children are the cause of maybe it's the case that unhappy people have children. Well, actually, we can follow people through time and resolve that question. So, for example, this is what my mother says would happen if you follow a group of people from pre-parenthood through parenthood. If you measure their happiness before they had children and measure their happiness after. My mom's theory is it goes up. Is it what really happens? No. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. It goes down. Now, it turns out that it's not actually having children that seems to make people less happy. It's being with them. So, for example, I'm showing you here depression rates in women who have children and are employed, in women who don't have children and are employed. And what do you see? You can see these two rates are generally identical. The difference is if you look at stay-at-home moms. If you look at women who are spending their day with their children, you can see they're almost twice as likely to be depressed. Now, how much unhappiness do children cause? I mean, yes, that parents may be less happy, but how much less happy? Well, here's a very interesting study. This was done by a team, a guy who won the Nobel Prize in Economics a few years ago. And what you can see is you're seeing data on how happy, these are all women in this study, how happy women are as they do a number of normal activities. Talking with friends is great. Eating, everybody enjoys eating. Grocery shopping, it's not so good. And doing housework, who likes doing housework? Okay, so the question is, how happy are these women when they are in the presence of their own children? And the answer is, it's about like cleaning the toilet or vacuuming. Now, this seems a little strange to most of us. I mean, those of us who are parents think, wait a second, my child is my greatest source of happiness. I would do anything for my child. I'm so grateful for my child. And I'm a grandparent, and I can tell you it only gets better. So How can that really be the case? Shouldn't we be skeptical of data that tell us children are making us less happy? Well, on average, children lower their parents' happiness, but that doesn't mean it's true for all parents. If you're thinking it isn't true for me, bless you, it may not be true for you. I'm showing you data on average. Now let me show you for whom it is true. Now, first, let me orient you to this graph. I'm showing you here a graph. These are the data that we would see, the happiness data we would see if children had no impact on happiness. If they had no impact, we'd expect to see a distribution like this. They make half the people happier. Those are shown in blue. They make half the people less happy. Those are shown in kind of olive colored over there. And those people cancel each other out. So on average, it's a wash. In a world in which children had no effect on happiness, this is what the data would look like. Now, this is what my mom said the world looked like. This is what she taught me. The world looks like this. Children make virtually everybody happy. Yes, there are a few oddball, strange people down there on the other side of the distribution who aren't made happy by their children, but most people are made happier. What do the real data look like? The real data look like this. The curve is shifted slightly to the right. In other words, on average, children seem to lower parents' happiness by a small amount. But what I want you to notice, even on this graph, is there are still plenty of parents in the blue region, plenty of parents who are showing a positive effect of having children. Who are those people? We have a name for them. They're called older married men. That's right. Older married men almost surely get a happiness boost from having children, and younger unmarried women almost always show a decline. I want you to think about what these data tell us. What it suggests is that your intuition going in was exactly right. Children do increase our happiness by being cute and silly and delightful and all the other good stuff that you associate with kids, just what you thought. But they also reduce our happiness by being extremely hard work. Not just time and attention, but blood, sweat, tears, hair. They tend to negatively impact the happiness of people who are doing the hardest work. And those are the people with the fewest resources. People who are young, people who are raising their children alone, and in every society on earth, women who do much more, even in the most egalitarian societies, do more of the child care than men. Children have costs. Children have benefits. Those are not evenly distributed throughout the population. Those who are mainly getting the benefits, not surprisingly, seem to be happy when they have children. Those who are paying most of the costs seem to be less happy. So, okay, that's a very brief tour of my mom's advice. Was she right? Well, yeah, kind of. She wasn't entirely wrong. She was just not as nuanced as she should have been. She told me marriage would make me happy, and it's true, but not any marriage, just a good one. She told me money would make me happy, and she was right, but only up to a point. And she told me children would make me happy, and yes, that is true for some of us, but not true for all of us. In every human society, it's very interesting to note, in every human language, the word for happiness is, not in everyone, but in almost every human language, the word for happiness is related to the word for fortune or for luck. And that's because for most of human history, happiness was luck. Happiness is something that happened to you. It's only in the last 2 centuries, particularly in the last century, that for the first time, human happiness is not entirely in the hands of fate, it's in the hands of humans. The question is how we find it. Our cultural wisdom gives us answers that I hope I've shown you are not necessarily wise. I love my mother. She's not the person I turn to when I want to know how cells divide or how stars are born. Who do I turn to? Where should I look? I look to science. Modern people turn to science for facts about the world. And what makes human beings happy on average is a fact. It is a set of facts that can be and are being uncovered and discovered. My personal belief is that the more we learn about the facts, the more we learn about the science, the more we learn about the truth of happiness, the better our chances are of finding it for ourselves and for others. Well, I've talked long enough and I'm eager to talk with all of you. So thank you for listening to me go over what my mother got right and got wrong.
All right, I'm turning my camera back on so that we can move right into the Q&A session. And I'm gonna try to read through the questions as they're coming in and then pose them at the same time. We'll see how well this goes. All right, so the first question, of course, there's a few questions about the unique 2020-2021 global situation. So one question is, what do you anticipate this 2020 and 2021 global pandemic, what do you think that will tell us about happiness? And do you think it's going to adjust any of the research that you might have just been talking about?
You know, I don't. I don't think we're going to find suddenly that any of the basic truths that I've discussed are going to be different afterwards. I don't think we're going to discover suddenly money doesn't matter, marriage is a bad idea, and everybody who's ever had a child was doubling their happiness. We do know because several entities like Gallup, for example, they survey world happiness on a daily basis. We know that 2020 was one of the worst years for happiness on record. No, I mean, if it weren't, you'd have to wonder about the measures, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a terrible year. And, you know, what's it going to teach us? I'm not sure it's going to teach us new lessons about human happiness. I think, though, let me say that again. I'm not sure it's going to teach scientists new lessons about human happiness, but it may teach the people who went through the pandemic something about happiness. So I will I've been telling audiences for decades, the best predictor of happiness is your relationships with family and friends. If you have a bunch of them and they're good, you're probably a happy person regardless of all the other things in your life. And they nod dutifully and go, yeah, that sounds right. I bet a lot of them know that at a much deeper level today than they did almost a year ago. Because being cut off from those relationships suddenly makes you acutely aware of how incredibly important they were. I tell audiences, children are hard work, and they kind of nod. A bunch of people have now been stuck at home with their kids for a full year, and they are totally on board. They're not at all surprised by research showing children are really, really tough work for the people who have to do it. So I don't think I have any special answers to your questions. I'm sorry. I don't think this was just a bad year for happiness, and maybe individuals did learn some lessons, but I'm not sure yet that I've seen any brand new science coming out of it. Live and learn. We will.
And you mentioned the Gallup doing the worldwide data on happiness. I had a couple of people actually ask what kind of research there is that talks about the cultural differences, global differences in happiness. And if there are, you know, when you talk about money and children, does it vary? And how is that research sort of influenced these days?
Yeah, there's lots of there's lots of research on how happy people are in general. And it's surveys that are administered all over the world. So we have good happiness data on hundreds of countries. What there isn't is lots of really in-depth research about what things are causing it and who's happier than someone else. Most scientific research in the social sciences is done on Western democracies because we're the ones who can afford it. We're the ones that happily allow our citizens to answer any question in the world. So I guess I would say there's lots of places in the world where happiness is still more of a mystery. But if somebody said, are there cultural differences? I'd say, yeah, sure, there are cultural differences. For example, year after year after year, the Scandinavian countries come out as the happiest countries on earth. Wow, why? Is it just being tall and blonde-haired and blue-eyed that makes you happy? No, it looks like it's things like more income equality, democracy, opportunities for women, society sharing burdens. You know, you're not worried every day about whether your children have to go to the hospital and it'll bankrupt you. You're not terribly worried about how you're going to eat or who's going to get a college education. And so alleviating these kinds of worries from large groups of citizens, no surprise, makes them more satisfied with their lives and happier. So yeah, there's lots of good work on cultural differences in happiness.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and let's see. This one's unrelated, switching topics here. So you talked about some external factors that predict happiness. What would you say are some intrinsic, more like personality factors that are strong predictors of who might be happy?
Oh, personality factors. Well, you know, no surprises. People who are extroverted tend to be a little happier than people who are introverted. People who are agreeable, high in agreeableness, tend to be happier than people who are always arguing and difficult to get along with. So I've never seen any data where I went, oh my God, who would have known that that kind of person is happier than that kind of person? But I think, you know, if you don't want to focus on demographic factors like are you married, do you have kids, how much money do you make, I think the next thing to focus on is how much happiness is under our control. And the answer is a lot of it. We can do a lot of things in our lives to increase our happiness. Now, I would just hasten to add, there is nothing you can do today that will greatly increase your happiness tomorrow. Becoming happier is a bit of work. It's like dieting. If you just do some small things religiously, over a long period of time, you will lose weight. Just step up your exercise, take down your calorie intake. The second law of thermodynamics says you have to lose weight. Similarly, if you will attend to exercising more, to sleeping better, to spending more time in social relationships you find gratifying, to spending a little time every week thinking about what happened that week for which you are grateful, blah, 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 you will get happier. Maybe not in 1 week, maybe not in 2, but 6 months later, you will turn around and say, you know, I'm just feeling a little better in my life as a result of these little practices. Mm-hmm. So it isn't all demographics. It's not just your salary and which gender you are. There are things people can do. None of them is surprising, but they have to be done religiously over long periods of time.
And someone just asked this question while you were talking about this, the relationship between, it's related, I think, physical and mental health and happiness. You know, you were talking about sleep and eating right and that sort of thing. And so do you see a strong relationship between physical health, mental health, and happiness?
Yeah, you sure do. I mean, wouldn't you be surprised if I said the sicker you are, the happier you are? Duh, no. So yes, as far as we can tell, physical and psychological well-being go hand in hand. It's interesting when I will talk to people who care about global health, or if I talk to physicians, they always want to know if making you happy will make you healthier. Because for them, it's like, okay, I could justify trying to raise the happiness level of people if you told me it would reduce heart disease and make them live longer. And I always say, no, it's really the other way around. The only reason we should care about physical health is because it makes people happy. If people were just as happy sick as well, who cares? Why spend money making them better? In fact, making people happier is, for me, the entire reason we should care about people's physical well-being. But yes. And it's not just being well instead of having cancer. I'm talking about little things like a good night's sleep. Read Matt Walker's book, Why We Sleep. Wow, eye-opening what you are doing to yourself by not getting good sleep. Physical exercise. It's a funny thing. People hate to do it. They hate to do it before they've done it, but they actually like it while they're doing it, and they feel great about it afterwards. And it's a really good predictor of happiness. So yeah, join a gym.
I'm writing down Matt Walker, Why We Sleep. I'm going to read that one.
Matt Walker, wonderful psychologist at Berkeley. I just love it.
I'm going to read that. Okay, we only have 4 or 5 minutes left, and there's so many questions, but there were some really good ones. I'm going to jump around on topics here. One is, how does technology and social media impact happiness?
It makes it go up or down. That's right. Both of the things you imagine could happen do happen, depending on what we're talking about. To the extent that your mom can get on Facebook and see what you had for breakfast, it probably made her happier because probably you weren't going to pick up the phone and talk about it. So to the extent that we are using social media to connect with people with whom we already have real relationships, it's wonderful. I mean, I don't know what I would have done without Zoom. My wife and I often say, what would we have done 25 years ago in a pandemic? I mean, would we have used the phone? What if we didn't have phones? What would we have done? So bless social media for allowing me to connect with people with whom I have real relationships. Now, on the other hand, if you are a teenage girl and you are spending a lot of time on social media with people you hardly know or never know, collecting their likes about everything you do, watching their magical, wonderful fake lives, thinking they're real, social media is not going to be a very good thing for you. Mm-hmm. Social media, my God, it's so complex. It's like a tool. Like if I said, is a knife good for you or bad? You'd go, well, I mean, in the hands of a mugger, it's bad. In the hands of a surgeon, it's good. The same thing is true about this tool that we use to connect with each other. I think we're using it for good right now, and it's making us happier. It's making me happier, at least, to be here chatting with you. But just as you suspect, overuse, the wrong kind of use by people of particular age groups seems to be associated with some negative psychological outcomes. I have grandchildren. I don't have kids anymore, but if I had children, I would do what everybody in Silicon Valley who invents these tools does. I would greatly limit my children's use of social media.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Well, and speaking of you versus your grandchildren, well, this might have to be our last question. What do you see as generational differences? Like, are there, you look at baby boomers versus Generation Z. Does the levels of happiness or what contributes to levels of happiness change from one generation to the next?
We don't know the answer to this question about generations. And what we do know is about old people, middle-aged people, young people. And you might say, wait, isn't that the same question? No. If I tell you that older people and younger people are happier than the people in the middle, and I showed you those kinds of data, is that because they're older, younger, and middle-aged, or is that something to do with their generation? In other words, the era in which they grew up. Maybe old hippies like me are just happy, but 100 years from now, guys my age won't be happy because they didn't get to be hippies like me. Until enough time goes by that we can separate the effects of age and generation, age and cohort is what we call them in science, we can't really answer your question. But for all intents and purposes, we do know that right now, baby boomers are pretty happy people because they're in that age band where they're done with life's difficult concerns. People in the middle, in their 40s, are really taking care of people on both ends. They're taking care of the younger people. They're worrying about the older people. Older people tend to be happy because they're done with all the challenges of life and they do something that's very, very wise. We used to think when we examined older people and looked at their friendship networks, we got really worried because we noticed that as your grandmother ages, her network is shrinking and shrinking. We went, oh my gosh, Grandma, what are we going to do? But Laura Carstensen at Stanford has discovered something amazing. Grandma is intentionally shrinking her social network, and she's shrinking it so that it only contains a few people she damn well really likes. Mm-hmm. All the peripheral people are just gone. She just doesn't want to spend time with them. And so she's spending all of her time, maybe it's you, I hope, with the people she really loves. This is a difference between older people and middle-aged people and younger people, and that's not a bad recipe for happiness, to spend more time with the people who matter and less time with the people who are just a bit of a drag.
And now those older people have social media to help them keep all of that going through this crazy year that we're having. That's right.
My grandchildren can't escape me.
All right. Well, I have that we are at time. So, Dan, I just want to thank you so much for providing this great talk today. And I just want to remind everybody that we're going to post this up on our community page. You can access the recording there anytime. We will email this out to you in a couple of days. You can also check the schedule of upcoming events and register for those. So again, thank you so much to Dan Gilbert. It was such a pleasure to have you. And thanks everyone for joining us. I hope we see you at the next event. Have a great day.